hands. His work inside creates so many goals. But let's move on and talk about the big game coming up, the Swans and the Hawks. I want to start, Jason, if we can, by looking at the way these two sides have built their list, because I think it's instructive for everybody, both sides at the top of their game. And if you have a look at the Sydney Swans, they've got 3 picks, top 20 picks only. McVeigh, Nick Smith and Gary Rowan. They've got 6 guys traded in. Buddy, Josh Kennedy, Ted Richards, Reece Shaw. They've got Ben McGlynn and Kurt Tippett. 4 rookies, and that's, I think, a classic way to elevate yourself up the ladder. Lloyd, Jack, Cunningham and, of course, Rampy. And 1 international player in the big boy Pike.
And I love the fact that they've made the most of some very mediocre draft picks. I mean, Malcheski picked number 64 back in 2002. Kieran Jack, originally coming from a rookie, he was picked number 53, and then Luke Parker, who's a star, at pick number 40. That's really picking the eyes out of the draft, isn't it?
Yeah. And when you've been at the top or near the top, as they've been for so long, it's difficult to do that. The theory is that you get the plum picks down at the bottom and you can climb your way up. It's much more difficult to get them from when you're up at the top.
I think it's great to have a look at these clubs, and we'll put up Hawthorn's now, because there is so much focus on getting those extra picks. The fact that clubs have been allegedly tanking to get those picks. Here's Hawthorn, just 5 top 20 picks. Hodge, Roughead, Lewis, Isaac, Smith and Birchall. 6 traded in. This has been their classic strength, the cherry picking. Gibson, Hale, Burgoyne, Lake, Spanger, Gunston. 4 rookies, Suckling, Segler, Bruce and Langford. But so many players above the top 20 that have gone on to be true stars of the game.
Yeah. Again, looking at some of the value picks, Bruce, originally a rookie, and pick number 47.
Pinched out of the Swans area.
Brad Hill, pick number 33. And Sam Mitchell for pick number 36, the career that he's had. Outstanding.
And we shouldn't underestimate the fact that we've put them, in both those cases, they've gone into good environments. Standards are high, disciplines are strong, and they make them better players.
Let's focus on Hawthorn, because we're going to talk to the Swan skipper shortly. But if this was to be another flag for Hawthorn, Jason, back-to-back flags, surely, given the problems they've had right from the start or the end of last season, it's got to go down as one of the all-time great victories. Yeah,
they've got, I think, an opportunity here to write a unique chapter in the history of the game. If we take a timeline through what the last 12 months has been for the Hawthorn Football Club, you kick back to the preliminary final of 2013, unfortunately, a second knee for Brendan Whitecross, who misses the entire season. Then into the grand final of the same year, Brian Late cops a 4-match suspension. That doesn't help for the start of next season. In the off-season in October, Buddy Franklin, he heads off to Sydney. Then we get round to the 2014 season in round 4. Liam Shields does his AC joint, misses 5 weeks. He's an extremely important player. Round 5, Jed Anderson, who is going to be a gun midfielder, he's out for the season. After round 5, he had pneumonia and then developed a shoulder after that. In round 7, Mitchell does his hamstring. He misses 8 weeks. Lake 6 weeks with a calf. Move on to round 8. You get Gibson tears a pectoral muscle. He misses 9 weeks.
Jeez.
Rioli does his first hammy for the year. It's only a mild one. He only misses 3 weeks for that one. Then we get to round 10. The coach goes down. He goes to hospital with Guillain-Barré syndrome. 5 weeks out of the game. McAvoy does a hamstring. He's out for a few weeks as well. We move on to round 15. Rioli does his second hamstring.
Can't win, Mike.
This is a 10-weeker. You get Sewell in round 16, does a hammy. Costs him 5 weeks on the sidelines, and then in round 22, Suckling's out for a couple of weeks. So, look, it's a great effort to get there through all those challenges. Every club has challenges, make no mistake about it.
Yeah,
but getting there's one thing. Getting there's one thing. Finishing off is what it's all about.
3 more question marks for you now. Rioli, McAvoy and Sewell. Now, let me put the case against Rioli. I watched him on the weekend. There were flashes. I mean, we know how good he can be. I want to show you something from the 2012 Grand Final and say this is why Rioli can't play this week.
It's going to come up shortly, but this is regarding a boom recruit from South Australia, Stewie Jew.
No, it's not. No. This is Cyril Rioli chasing Lewis Jeddah down the wing at the MCG. Jeddah, I wouldn't like. No one in the world would like to be chasing him.
You're correct. So nobody in the game catches him in that situation.
No, that wasn't the issue. The issue wasn't that he couldn't catch him. This was Rioli having played 4 games in a row, and the bulk of the games for the year, and then he just blew up. Yeah,
but hang on. He's had to sprint 150 metres, and he may have had 3 or 4 efforts beforehand. But I'll tell. Okay, let me argue the 4 case. And look, it's a big decision to be made, and it would be a huge gamble. But it keeps reminding me of 2008, where 10 or 15 minutes from a man by the name of Stuart Jew turned the game. And that's what Cyril Rioli can provide. If you remember this, I mean, turning off one step, kicking a goal, a couple of minutes later he hooks one from a tight angle on the left foot, and all of a sudden the game turned on its head. I just keep thinking in the back of my mind that Cyril Rioli can have the same impact in a 10 or 15-minute spell in that game.
You missed the point. Dew was match hardened. Rioli can do...
Rioli match hardened?
He didn't look match... He never looked match hardened. But the issue is, Rioli blew up having played most of the season.
You understand what you're saying?
You're going to have to ask him, as good as his best 10 minutes can be, he's going to have to do it in a 2-hour marathon, and they're going to stretch him, and he's going to have to chase.
No doubt.
He's going to have to work.
No doubt.
It's a massive risk, and I don't think they'll take it.
I think they will, because I'm hearing that Jason likes it, and the president, the chairman, I think on the weekend also suggested the same thing. So
the chairman likes it.
He likes it. I know
it has to happen then.
Well, I know there's a magnet on either side of the refrigerator down at Brighton.
The same chairman also said, we don't play unfit players.
Well, that's the issue. What's the definition of fitness? McAvoy's the other interesting one. He was recruited to help win the Hawks a premiership, and right now Segler's got his position.
Well, he has, and look, I think that's been great for the club because it's put pressure on those positions. So there's now 3 quality ruckmen, and you've also got Luke Loudon, the 4th ruckman, coming up underneath. If you play well, you play. If you don't, you've missed out now. McAvoy's been in and out a couple of times. Segler didn't have his best game in the preliminary final, no doubt about that, but he still gives flexibility, and he created opportunities, and he's earned that position through consistent form throughout the course of the year.
Isn't it late to be changing your structure and your processes 1 week out? I mean, Segler's...
Well, yeah, but if you changed... If you swap the ruckman, it's not going to change the process or the system or the way they go about it. Not at all.
So where do you lean on that?
Personally, and I have nothing to do with it, I think Segler's done enough to play on the weekend.
I think the other interesting question is, what do the Swans do with the key outside players, Isaac Smith and Brad Hill? I was staggered on the weekend to watch just how much space Brad Hill had, but that's the Port Adelaide way, and it nearly got them across the line. Have a look at this vision where Brad Hill is essentially just running his own race, and he was a dominant force, and Ken Hinkley, I think, could argue that not as dominant as some of the players who he had running for him, like Gerard Polek. But on the weekend, I think we're going to see Harry Cunningham go to him. Maybe it'll be Lloyd, but the Lloyd and Cunningham duo, I think, will pick up Isaac Smith and Brad Hill, and it'll be a totally different game played by the Sydney Swans as to the one played by Port Adelaide.
I agree, and I think Cunningham was certain to go to Hill.
Well, Hill and Smith are the 2 genuine good outside runners that can hurt you, so they're going to cop some attention, aren't they?
They are.
What about the billionaires, Jason? What do you expect there from the defence from the Swans?
Well, it's going to be a team defence again. I mean, you can't just sit there and say, this bloke's got to handle him and another one's got to handle the other bloke. They've got to give each other a chop out at different stages of the game. They're going to get isolated on occasions. They're going to find the best way they can to break even in some of the contests, particularly against the likes of Tippett and Franklin.
So Lake will go to Tippett, won't he?
You would expect Lake to go to Tippett, and you would think that Gibson's probably the main opponent for Franklin. But again, as he pushes up, I'm sure they'll roll over and give players a spell.
Are you worried about Brian? He was a Norm Smith medalist last year. He's had an interrupted lead-in. On the weekend, he could have had 6 goals kicked against him, and clearly the instructions to Schultz were, move this guy around the ground. Don't allow him to sit back and become the intercept mark again. See Schultz taking it up the ground. He had 20 possessions. There he is up on the wing, and he could have, if he had have kicked more accurately, Schultz, he would have been perhaps the difference between the win and the loss. And you can see they're running him around. I think they're trying to get him to the extent of his aerobic capacity.
But Tippett won't do that to him.
Well, I think
Tippett will stay at home, won't he?
Yes, but I think he's still got the capacity to move up and around the ground. He can float up the centre half forward and then go into the ruck and drag Lake, continually drag him away, up the ground. They've got Reid that can sit in behind.
It was only 2 weeks earlier, though, when Lake played on Hawkins and did the wrestling.
He did very well. But also there's decisions to be made there. If they start dragging you up the field, at what point do you drop off and you come back and you sit inside that defensive 50 and let traffic pick him up as he goes through the field, because they can't hurt you from out there?
Jason, super climax to the game on Saturday. Magnificent climax, Port and Hawthorn. Could have been even more exciting. Now, I want to show you a non-decision late in the game, as late as you can possibly get, and tell me why this isn't paid. Lake in front. Does he not dive on the ball there?
He does.
Was the instruction that we've got to prevent blokes diving on the footy?
Yeah, true, and it looked really bad. You could argue the case that it did spill out and then the Port player dragged it back, but personally, if I was umpiring, I probably would have pinged Brian Lake for diving.
How would that have been? Angus Monfries with a shot with 2 seconds to go to win the preliminary final.
Is that the only contentious decision in the game?
No, but they're more contentious when they're late, Jason. You know that.
What about Shields? He has been a really significant player for the Hawks. He's going to get a big job on the weekend.
He will, but I'll tell you what I loved. I'm going to show a little passage in a moment. There's so much discussion about who's got the most outside run and have you got the legs to go with them. Don't forget the hard things that actually win games of football, particularly finals football. Now, have a look at this. This is 3 efforts, 3 tackles, just a dogged attack at the man with the ball that eventually causes a spillover and results in a Hawthorn goal. And it's those sort of inside efforts that you need from 22 players. So he gets Trengove there, he blocks Broadbent coming through the other way, then he chases Carlisle and gets the ball to spill free and ends up in a rough head goal. So as much as we talk about who's got the legs and who's going to run who off their feet, still got to do the hard yards inside. Explain
the pattern of the Hawthorn players who kick a goal or playing field and suddenly they surge into the midfield. Bruce, Gunston, Roughhead.
Well, I think it's important that you rotate the numbers through there, and the Hawks tend to change up not just the on-field 4 but also the front 6. That keeps the opposition guessing. It keeps refreshing the midfield. I think it takes a little bit of heat off the midfielders that don't have to play there for a huge percentage of the game and then have really weary legs at the end of the game. So it allows your best midfielders to keep a little bit of life in your legs by giving them a spell now and then.
Do they make that decision? It seems spontaneous. It seems like...
It's all part of rotation, so they know. There's a licence to rotate through when the time suits, but it's all part of organised structure.
They've used 35 different combinations through the finals, the Hawks, and the Swans have used 27. Are you worried, though, that Gunston is getting too far away from goal and Bruce hasn't kicked the same amount of goals in recent weeks?
Well, they've still been able to win, which is a good sign when that's happening. But look, we'll see at different stages throughout the course of the game. You see Gunston, you see Roughhead in particular float behind the ball, particularly late in quarters, or if the opposition's got a run on. We even saw Bruce down back at one stage on the weekend, and he managed to get a couple of rebounds out of the defensive 50. It's all about reading the play and working out how the flow of the game is, and at different stages. It's everybody's turn to go behind the ball.
The Swans were scary Friday night, but the thing that would have scared Hawthorn most, I reckon, occurred in the first minute. Buddy steaming up from the forward line to a Reeshaw kick and taking it as cleanly as I've ever seen Buddy take a mark. I mean, that's not typical Franklin, is it? That just hands out in front, one grab.
Oh, he's done it pretty regularly for a number of years.
It's not typical of him. It was a stop, catch it. I reckon he's playing better now than he was in 2008 when Lee Matthews said he had the best season of any individual ever. And here's the comparison. I mean, they're really healthy numbers, aren't they, on the disposals in total. The goals, he's slightly down.
Accuracy is an important one.
Accuracy's better. Yeah, I think he's running straight at Jace, isn't he?
He's trying to on occasion. Look, the numbers are reasonably similar. It was a much more heavily scoring emphasis in 2008, wasn't it, this year? I thought he played probably the most complete game I've seen him play on Friday night.
There
was tremendous.
Big column in the weekend suggesting that they'd sorted out injections in his thumbs. Were they a problem for him over the last couple of years?
You speak to any forward, you have problems with your fingers and in particular your thumbs. Sometimes it feels good, sometimes it doesn't. He's also had that off-season to get it right this year as well.
How much of a impact is the psychology of this game for Buddy going to be? His goal-kicking against the Hawks versus his goal-kicking against the rest is a problem, it would seem.
Well, we saw him. This is the first time they met throughout the course of the year. They've met a couple of times, remember. He was spraying them everywhere. There's going to be some nerves. There's going to be some jitters. There's no doubt about that. That's not an easy shot by any stretch of the imagination.
Just for him.
But let me tell you right now, don't think that the Hawthorn players aren't in his ear telling him about this and hoping that this is going to be the case if and when he does have set shots at goal on the weekend.
Well, let's have a look at the accuracy in 2014 versus Hawthorn. 5 goals, 29%, versus the rest, 65%.
Is it just freaky, or do you think there's any physical reason for that?
Probably coincidence more than likely. I mean, you'd have to see that pattern over a couple of seasons, but the Hawthorn players will be hoping it continues, and the Sydney players will be hoping that he just, relaxes on the weekend.
You wanted this on the rundown.
No, I didn't.
Is there any chance that there's any psychological warfare going on here? Because I heard one of his former teammates have this to say over the weekend.
You know, what have we played? We've played 2 against him so far, and what's he kicked for? 11, I think.
Well, all that is, Gerard, is a reflection of player awareness. They know everything that's going on in the game now.
And they pretend not to.
Ruffy wouldn't have texted him by the just remember your accuracy, etc.
He sold him one short too. He said 4:11 instead of 5:12.
Would he be reading the papers, buddy, and listening to watching TV?
It depends.
Some people don't.
Some players do, some don't. I don't know what Buddy's preference is. He doesn't strike me as the sort of bloke that's going to sit down and read the paper from cover to cover. I think he's a little bit more laid back and relaxed than that.
Plenty more Swans chat coming up after the break because they're co-captain.